this, because I do religious programmes, so I wouldn't lie to you. But our next guest is called Robinson, and we had not planned that. The reason why I say that is because that's the kind of link that inferior radio stations do. We don't do that kind of thing. But our next guest is Cole Robinson. Happy 46th wedding anniversary, by the way, to Joe and Muriel Waring. They're in Brinskull. And lots of love from your grandson, Simon, all the family as well. All the best to you. Have that record on us, and I'm sure you'll have a good celebration. I hope you've had a good celebration today. Our next guest is Cole Robinson. He's called Jim Robinson. He's from the Salford War Memorials Project, and they're also doing work Jim's doing work in Bolton as well. And I know Jim's been listening to our programme this evening, so let's welcome him on. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for talking to us. You've obviously heard of the programme tonight, and you'll have heard people talking about the state of war memorials. Just before we hear about what you do, in general terms in the North West, Jim, what do you think the state of our war memorials is?
Well, I've been looking mostly at Salford and the Bolton area, and my own experience is the great majority are pretty good, especially the main district cenotaphs or memorials, the ones that were originally installed by the councils. Having said that, there's a lot of the, shall we say, privately owned ones, which includes churches, social clubs, schools, etc., that aren't as well cared for or that have even gone missing. And I think that is the distinction, that certain ones are protected because they're actually totally publicly owned, like the council ones, whereas a lot of the private ones were privately funded by members of an organisation or group, and therefore they've not had that level of protection. So when things have changed, they've got lost or disappeared or just forgotten about.
Yeah, I suppose if you get a change of ownership and somebody else gets in charge of the building and they didn't actually put their hand in the pocket to get it down, and as generations go along, and you can almost see it happening. I'm sure nobody means any disrespect by it, but
I'm sure they don't.
Yeah, but you can see that there's a less of an impetus to make sure it looks, as spick and span as it could do.
I think as well, certainly based on what I've found, a lot of ones that are missing. I noticed one of your callers before was mentioning what we would refer to here as a street shrine.
Right.
There's been quite a lot of those, but...
This is the one on the side of the house, is it? The gable end one?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of those that were privately done by the local people of that and the surrounding streets. But, of course, there was so much regeneration in the late 50s, 60s and 70s. And a lot of the time, quite a lot of those were lost at that time period, because the actual attitude towards them was very different. They were very forward-looking, and that was a thing to the past. So I don't think it was meant with any disrespect, but it's been and gone, we're going for the future, we're rebuilding and revitalising the area, and they just didn't think to keep them. So odd ones were kept, and a lot of council museums have got them. Because they've nowhere to display them all, they have them in storage. Certainly that is the case in Bolton and in Salford.
Well, I want to talk in a moment about the naming that you talk about, because I know Steve is also, who's with us too, he's also very passionate about this. But I wanted to talk about your passion for it, just before we do that. Why do these war memorials mean so much to you, Jim?
I think, especially with the First World War ones, but also with the Second, for me, it's a link to a lost generation. So many young men and women, but majority were men, were lost. We lost the best part of a whole generation in that 4.5 years of that conflict. And that's a massive number that's previously to that really unprecedented in our history. And I think if we allow ourselves to forget that, we forget the huge change that brought us socially and made us, or was a building block of making us the nation we are today, with a more integrated society and especially bringing better rights for women.
The thing I always think about, you'll hear in about a quarter of an hour's time, 20 minutes time, an interview I've done with somebody about International Holocaust Memorial Day, and a member of the Jewish community in Manchester. And I think I say in that interview, if not, it's the one that's on tomorrow night on the same subject, but I say in one of those interviews that my generation, we just simply can't understand, can we? We've never lived through war. We've not had the the atrocities that has been visited by those generations, and we've not had the austerity and the hardship. And when you look at these memorials, you suddenly realise that we've been darn lucky.
We have, yeah. And I think that's part of it. Not only remembering the loss, but remembering what we've gained with the peace and prosperity, I beg your pardon, that we have as a result of knowing that we have men and women willing to make that sacrifice to protect that for their fellow citizens.
Tell me about the work that you've been doing in Salford and also subsequently in Bolton as well.
Well, it's about 4 years now. We started off in Salford, ironically enough, as a result of one of the founders of Swarm trying to trace information on a missing street shrine that one of her relatives was on. And we realised that there wasn't a catch-all comprehensive record of exactly who's remembered and where. And that's what we started doing, looking at memorials that maybe needed a bit of TLC, so we could look to make reports and try and get them renovated, repaired, restored, protected in the case of one that was under threat of demolition. That was the Oasis Academy, previously the Salford Unitarian Church, and that was preserved as a result of that and now stands proudly in the newest Oasis Academy at just up from Salford Keep. And that was the start of it, that there wasn't one source. It was all a hodgepodge of higgledy-piggledy sources. So somebody that just knows they had a great uncle that died in the Great War hadn't got anywhere to really look in one place if they didn't already know a great deal about the person. And that was part of it that we were trying to pull together, get all the information into one place so somebody in America that can't come over here, for instance, can see in one place and say, that must be him, because the mum and dad arrived.
And how have you gone on in the 4 years? Is it well on now?
It's a monumental task, is our little job.
I have to say, it sounds like one.
But yes, we've got a very active forum on the internet. We've got a Facebook group. I'm actually compiling the database that pulls everything together, which we're hoping in time for the anniversary of the declaration of war to have available at least on DVD, if not online, as a searchable resource. But we're going to be carrying on adding to it because we think a lot more information will come through
and is it
as the centenary goes on.
Yeah, and is it a similar situation in Bolton? Because you've got involved in work there now, haven't you?
Yes, well, I work in Bolton. I got involved with Swarm through a friend, and I thought there's so many crossovers because they're neighbouring boroughs that we had the same problem in Bolton. I work in the archives, and we get so many people who all they know is a name. They just assume the person was in the Loyals because they were from Bolton. And it turns out they weren't. They were in some other regiment. So I've combined the two and made one large database covering Bolton and Salford. Not just of men that died, but any information we can get on men that served, men that were prisoners of war, wounded. And it's pulling together other sources that are already available, like Commonwealth war graves, and also things like local newspaper reports. So that, again, it makes a one-stop resource for anyone to look for men and women who served and died, not just in the First World War, but also in the Second and subsequent conflicts as well.
And finally, Jim, if people do want to contribute or want to learn more about the work that you're doing, both in Salford and in Bolton as well, what would they do about that?
Well, the Salford one, they can go on the forums or the Facebook group. If they just search Salford War Memorials or SWARM, SWARM, that will come up. Or for the Bolton ones, if they want to email, we have a dedicated email for that, which is Bolton War Memorials, all one word, @gmail.com. Or they can contact the Bolton Archives and Local Studies Service via the Bolton Council website.
Wonderful.
Because this is feeds into the larger commemoration project for the centenary that the local authorities are part of across, and also working with the Greater Manchester Archives Group and the Imperial War Museum.
All right, well, it sounds very, very impressive. Thank you very much indeed for spending some time with us. So when I go in the Central Library at Bolton, are you at the room at the back, or are you upstairs in the museum?
It's upstairs.
In the museum?
Yeah, it's in what we call now the Bolton History Centre. We moved up there about 6 years ago.
Oh, right.
So we've got a dedicated history centre and a dedicated team in there to help people with local history and family history.
I must come up and have a look. I go in the library all the time and I never get up the stairs. They're big, impressive stairs to climb as well, aren't they?
They're a good climb, yeah.
That's great. I'll call in and see you one day, Jim, when I'm in there. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
No problem.
Take care. Thank you very much indeed. That was fascinating, that wasn't it? Now, tell me about you do the similar kind of work, don't you, Steve?
Yeah, just smiling and nodding all the way through that and going, yeah, been there.
Been there, done it.
Yeah, and carrying on, and volunteers, we can't do without them, but yeah.
Just before we finish, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the work that you do in terms of talks and what have you. I know you're going to Rochdale. Is it Wednesday, did you say?
Yeah, Wednesday evening I do a range of talks, mostly on the First World War, but local history, steam trains, football, and I like to always put a World War I reference in. But I'm been invited to talk and give one of my most popular talks called A Mother's Tears. It's all the stories I've collected of death notices and postcards, and all from predominantly Chorley and Lancashire men. One from Tottington, would you believe, a lovely poem about a lad who was killed. And I compiled this into a talk called A Mother's Tears. And I'm at Rochdale Family History Society, I think it is, on Wednesday at Entwistle Road, Smith Street in Rochdale, 7:30, and it's open to members of the public. They can pay, and that's what I get up to, and doing a bit with the BBC as well, from what I can gather.
And also, how do you see it developing in Chorley?
It's developed, but it's growing and growing and growing. Yeah. I've got two villages, Eccleston and Ullswalton, asking about research, and we're obliged to do it. But look upon Chorley as, pioneers, but then Jim's already at it.
Yeah, he's at it in Bolton and Salford, and I'm sure there are others who are listening to us tonight, and they're at it in Oldham and Rochdale and Stockport and Bredbury and all the different places, all around the place. Lovely to see you, Steve. Thank you very much for coming in to see us, and I wish you well, and I know you Radio Lancashire listeners are going to have a great adventure with you around about the end of March, come the beginning of April.
Yeah, it's looking forward to that with Graham Liver.
All right then, thank you very much indeed for coming to see us. Near enough 11:30. This is George Michael on